And clearly, for many in Syria, a brutal regime is swept away, but it's also a time of concern for many, particularly minority groups like Christians, Alawis, and Kurds. The Assad regime, itself a minority of the Alawi sect, tended to protect other minorities. And with a Sunni majoritarian movement now leading this revolution, I think there are concerns on the parts of those minorities as to what happens. In the region, of course, it is a major setback for Iran and Hezbollah, its client, and it's a setback for Russia. The two main supporters of the Assad regime no longer have a regime to support. That is, in many respects, good news, I think, for regional stability. But it is also, again, a time of uncertainty. Can those who led the revolution to topple the old regime now consolidate power, which in many respects is a bigger challenge than the overthrow of the regime in the first place? And that remains an open question. What I can say with a fair degree of certainty is what I don't think is going to happen. I don't think you're going to see a rules-based democratic order emerge based on respected institutions anytime soon in Syria. That for over half a century of Assad rule and for decades before that, there was no emphasis on a legal foundation that protected all its citizens and provided security for all of its citizens, that provided government services, that provided economic opportunity.
It doesn't have both the history or the infrastructure to be able to run a government, a democratic government. But with the new U.S. administration coming in January, what advice would you give to policymakers that are navigating the complex dynamics of Syria and its regional impact?
Well, I think the first thing is to understand that the comments of President-elect Trump that we shouldn't get involved in Syria. We are involved in Syria. We have almost 1,000 troops there, and we are affiliated with one element of the Kurdish political landscape, the Kurdish movement in the northeast, which now faces an uncertain status in the future. So the first thing to note is that we are engaged. So what happens there is of direct concern to us. The second point I would make in terms of advice to a new administration is consult closely with partners and allies. We have close relations with all of Syria's neighbors: Turkey, Iraq, Jordan, Israel, and Lebanon. They are directly impacted by what happens in Syria, and they are also in a position to influence what happens in Syria, for better or for worse. So I would hope that even as we speak, that the lines among our respective capitals are heavily engaged as we seek to gain the assessment of the situation by those closer to it than we are, to determine their positions and their objectives, and then to try to influence that as much as we can for an outcome of some stability and security in Syria that serves the interests of the Syrian people and all of its neighbors.